You're about to enter into Monica's universe, where her inquiry may align you to new dimensions. You're about to cross a threshold into the unknown. Surrender to the experience. Willfully Ignorant. Ignite your individuality. We are in the age of new beginnings after the several new full moons this year that announce both dissolutions and brand new pastures. Pair the eclipses, the equinox, with the Saturn and Neptune new cycle. The upcoming weeks will show us an opportunity to show up and finally step up to our new individual ways. 2027 is approaching, and although it is not a prediction, because we already are wary of it, the cross of planning is closing. When Uranus finally enters Gemini at the end of April and Jupiter moves to Leo this summer while the nodes shift axis to the Aquarius Leo, we will feel plenty of sparks within and without. Today is Easter, the season of rising kings and queens. We have all risen, for we are all becoming. Let the next weeks finally bring a furious and climactic outcome. With peace or without it, life keeps creating every day, all the time. I have felt compelled to start doing new things, new ways of communicating, just trying new perspectives. I've been spending valuable time engaging in new methodologies that include plenty of play as a basic foundation, also including fascia movement in my body. It has been a beautiful introspective first trimester. And all of these things lead me to a sense of pure joy on a moment-to-moment basis. I had recently transiting Saturn square my nodal axis. Where am I coming from? And what have I left behind? And what kind of orientation am I bringing as a human? Those were the questions. I had a major breakthrough after the March 3rd lunar eclipse that will be manifested as the last text written in my book that I still have to finish. The ignition is set. The inner messages are clear now. Mercury retrograde in Pisces created an inner dialogue to what we call the divine spark. And when it met the North Node, it created an orientation that Mars had recently initiated in the same spot. The body knows that the last chapter with the last set of keys is gone, and the starting point of the clock is set back to 0. Everything set back to 0, and here we go. Amazing feeling. Let's fucking go. If you've been cooking stuff in the last months, if you've been fortunate enough, like I have been, to spend quality time away from my thoughts and more focus on my response mechanism, on my nervous system, then probably you know that this ignition point is quite amazing. If you feel that you are more aligned with your inner soul and all the disruptions that you see outside of yourself are not keeping you from being disconnected or distracted, because actually disruptions are breakers of flow that allow and give us blind spots or tensions, crises, even confrontations. These are the points to focus on. These early degrees of Aries are squaring my nodal axis. It has been telling me for the last year with Saturn and Neptune there that my direction is slightly different. And I listened to that for a whole year, and I'm coming with the goods. And here I am. Let's start testing this. Opening up the shades and looking at the sun, the life force, the light, the red light that arises every morning before I step into my balcony to sun gaze. What gives me light? What gives me life? It is the understanding that stepping into the space where the light is, it's an action that I take, that I am drawn to because the light, the life force, it's what fuels my presence on this planet Earth. And it gives me a sense of accountability, responsibility for the service that I sign up for by being a human on this earth. If anything, I'm very grateful for my life. I'm very grateful for living in this strange, weird, both ugly and beautiful times because I don't see only one side. I see the potential. I see the light. I see the emergence of what we're building. And again, thinking about the collective as the potential for our solar expansion, our fulfillment in creativity is what's going to reshape the dawn of this new turning. I want you to understand my thesis. We are in a very important moment in time where everything is a big reset, and the individual is given the opportunity to become educated into actions that are willful and can be turned into new possibilities of change rather than compliance. That's a sweet and privileged place to be. Quote, law is nothing else than an ordinance of reason for the common good, made by him who has care of the community and promulgated. Thomas Aquinas, Summa Theologica. Note, Aquinas argues that a law that is not reasonable is not a law, but a perversion of law. This is the root of my lawfulness argument. End of quote. By the way, I have created some slides with graphics that if you're only listening to this, take a few minutes to go through them eventually, because I'm not going to read them. Without contrast, there is no mutation. I'm bringing two things into this article that have been sitting in my draft box since mid-March: the realities of digital property and the consequence of ignorant compliance. In addition, not understanding the main difference between legality and lawfulness sends a vacuum to what standing for one's rights really is. Understanding the main difference between government, censorship, and complying with terms of agreement with digital platforms that are private companies. These are mutual contracts one abides by. Consent is the boundary. The fourth turning, the 2027 human design cross of planning ending, the age of Aquarius, the Kali Yuga. Names are unimportant. You can sense it now. The era of bartering with institutions to secure our services and our survival, a cycle that has governed us since 1615, is finally over. We're moving into the individual stream of the sleeping phoenix, a shift that is starting now and will only become more defined from 2027 onwards. The chaos is beautiful. Only mutation occurs in times of chaos. Due to the history that we're coming from, after 6 years from the terrible lockdowns and mandates, these were imposed only because actually people sign up for this compliance ignorantly. It was a test and everybody failed. There were only a few people, and I'm included, who did not fall for the scam. Some of us used the time to learn more about sovereignty and the critical nature of decision making. We also studied the energy of money and the profound difference between what is merely legal and what is truly lawful, arriving at the understanding of what freedom really is: the power to have more than one option, because otherwise you have no choice, and you are a slave of something or someone. And that's when I discovered that logic was going to be my ally for the rest of my life. Quote, all rights are property rights, and all property rights are reducible to rights in the physical body. Stefan Kinsella, Against Intellectual Property. Willfully ignorant. Ignorance is natural. It belongs to being human. It means there are things I do not know yet, areas I have not explored, questions I have not asked, holding a vacuum that is available for movement. Ignorance moves when attention is placed on it. By opening, it shifts, it transforms through engagement. Willfulness introduces direction, a pointed target which denotates an act of the will. Ignorance, instead, is the moment where the individual turns away, even when the information is available, even when something can be seen, because seeing it carries responsibility and consequence. Willful ignorance becomes the refusal to engage. It becomes the point where not knowing settles into a position that is comfortable and can be called when excuses are needed. Imagine them all tiled up inside a drawer, ready to be used as a distraction, because leaving behind a state of ignorance requires not only effort and energy, but repetition and commitment. When the individual does not engage with the principles that govern freedom, something else will shape behavior. Other implemented systems define the boundaries. Thus, outer authority replaces discernment. as compliance becomes the fake posture that pretends to hold the structure together when it actually chokes any movement. Quote, the basic axiom of libertarian political theory holds that every man is a self-owner, having absolute jurisdiction over his own body. In effect, this means that no one else may justly invade or aggress against another person. Murray Rothbard, The Ethics of Liberty. End of quote. Compliance, from Latin, com, together, with, plere, to fill. To comply is to align, to move in accordance, to feel oneself alongside another structure. It moves through participation, through alignment, and settles without requiring full awareness. Compliance begins through disengagement. There was a moment when I realized that not knowing is not the problem. There are things I do not know, things I haven't studied, things I haven't questioned yet. That feels open and alive. There is movement in it. There is another state. I could feel something didn't fully make sense. Something felt slightly off, and I did not go further. I could see that going further would require reorganizing something in my life, and I stayed where I was. That is the moment where ignorance becomes willful, moving quietly. It feels like postponing, procrastinating, and like saying, oh, I will look at it later. I will come back to this. Not. When the return does not happen, the space fills with limitations. I started noticing how many things I was participating in without fully understanding. Platforms, permissions, terms I didn't read, systems I trusted because everyone else did. Nothing felt forced. Everything felt normal, holding the invisibility. There is a moment when you realize you are already inside the structure, that you walked into it willfully. It sounded convenient and efficient, like things were working. Then something small appears. You hesitate before doing something. You sense something off, and your instincts check if it is allowed. You also wait for confirmation. In that pause lies the metamorphosis. The body is the first boundary. If I don't own my body, every action I take becomes conditional. I move when I'm allowed. I act when it is permitted. I access when it is granted. Ownership becomes access. Access becomes permission. Permission becomes dependence. And dependence sets the terms of your movement. 10 years ago, I was moving inside a structure I did not fully see, doing what I was expected, aligning with the path that promised recognition while negotiating within dynamics where my leverage was limited. And although nothing was careless and I was precise with my contracts, what was being given away was not written. It was the space I was not holding for myself, a subtle compliance that lived in what I allowed and what I normalized and what I did not question, even as my body signaled and I continued moving past it. Now there is a pause, there is breathing. I let emotional wave move before I decide. I take time before I sign anything, even if it shines. I look, I research. I ask myself whether this holds me or restricts my movement in the short term and beyond. And during the lockdown, my body was clear and I said it out loud, I will not comply. And that clarity came from listening, from recognizing what expands me and what confines me as I move. There is a moment where something does not align. You feel it before you understand it. A question appears. Why do I need permission for this? That question interrupts the automatic consenting. Attention returns. You may start reading the small print again while you start questioning it. As you notice where and why you are agreeing, thus participation becomes intentional. Your freedom lives in awareness. Ignoring it reorganizes the structure of your life around something external, an outer authority. Quote, the man who refuses to judge, who neither agrees nor disagrees, who declares that there are no absolutes and believes that he escapes responsibility, is the man responsible for all the blood that is now shed in the world. Ayn Rand, The Virtue of Selfishness, end of quote. The lineage of law. Legality and lawfulness differ in origin and application. Legality follows what is written and enforced in statutes. Lawfulness follows what is aligned with natural order and consequence. inalienable rights. Civil law codifies and administers through centralized authority. Common law develops through precedent and lived application. You can rebut when you stand in your law, your rights. And equity intervenes where strict rule produces imbalance, restoring proportion through remedy. These operate together within a system of order. One enforces structure through statutes, another evolves through use, and another one restores balance when structure moves out of proportion. There is a lineage that has approached this question through first principles, through an axiomatic understanding of the individual, its human action. There is a continuity in how humans have tried to understand what governs ownership via self-responsibility. It is not beginning now, and it does not depend only on technology. Cicero speaks of a law that is not written by man, a law that exists in accordance with nature, accessible through reason, constant and unchanging. In his language, law is not a decree. It is something discovered. John Locke brings that into the structure of property, grounding it in the self. The individual owns his body, his labor, and by extension, what he mixes his labor with. Property is not granted, it is derived from being. Murray Rothbard sharpened this into a rigorous framework. Self-ownership becomes the axiom. From there, natural law defines what is permissible. No aggression, no coercion, no violation of another property. Ethics becomes a solid structure, defining the difference between what is lawful in principle and what is declared legal in practice. There's a beautiful chart here that's called The Evolution of Natural Law. Probably is the only one I'm going to read. Aristotle had the locus in the state, Thomas Aquinas in God and reason, Locke in the individual, and Murray Rothbard in the acting axiomatic individual. The epistemology of Aristotle was theology. Of Thomas Aquinas was the right reason. For Aristotle, the view of property is the individual is strictly subordinate to the polis, no conceptual space for individual rights. Thomas Aquinas shifted a little bit and he championed independent philosophical inquiry, making rational ethics structural possible. Then Locke secularized natural law and derived private property from self-ownership plus labor mixed with unowned resources. And last, Rothbard rebuild the bridge between value-free economics and normative ethics using property rights as the absolute keystone. Quote, true law is right reason in agreement with nature. It is not universal application, unchanging and everlasting. We cannot be freed from its obligations by Senate or people. Cicero de Republica. End of quote. Where it meets the present. The terrain has shifted, yet the principles remain the same. Property extends into information, identity, and access to it. Far away from only land, body, or object. What I know, what I sign, what I store, and what I transmit all begin to carry the same weight as physical property. Preparation requires knowledge. Digital systems are being built to organize access of identity and willing participation. The language used is familiar. It deals with security, probably with convenience, but when identity becomes a credential issued, when participation requires continuous authorization, when ownership is mediated through systems that can be updated, restricted, or revoked, the nature of property shifts. Hence, it is conditional. One of the most important examples today is Apple iPhone OS making users upgrade their operating systems to allow certain governments access to your identity, asking you to identify yourself and your age under the pretense of protecting children. You have to know what you're signing. Go to the footnotes. There's more on this. This is the delicate threshold. So who holds the key? In practice, a choice appears in the moment where I am required to answer within a legal structure. And that choice depends on whether I understand the difference between legality and lawfulness. Legality asks if I followed what is written and enforced, if I filed, if I responded or complied with what was required. Lawfulness asks a different question, whether the claim itself stands on valid ground, whether there is a proper jurisdiction, whether my rights are being affected, whether consent is being assumed, and whether what is being asked is proportionate. From that understanding, I can proceed accordingly. I can respond through procedure where it applies, and I can stand in my rights where it matters, challenging the basis of the claim, correcting the record, and withholding agreement where no obligation has been established, as I did when mandates attempted to cross the private property of my body. Equity enters where balance needs to be restored, especially when the strict application of rule produces distortion or harm. A delicate threshold. This is an invitation to see things clearly. I will by no means reject technology, because technology is just giving me the tools to live in the times that I live. Tools extend capacity. They always have. The question has never been the tool. It has been the relationship to it. Natural law does not disappear in a digital environment. It does continue to operate within the same clarity. Consent still matters because self-ownership is key. Coercion will bring consequences if you allow your rights to be taken away willfully due to your ignorance. The difference is that the interface becomes subtle, which means discernment becomes central. I could give you a list of things to do and not to do, but that's not my purpose. That's not what I'm designed for. I'm here to inform that there are multiple ways of getting around this. First and foremost, as an individual, you always have a choice. Now, if you don't make decisions at the correct time because you're confused or under the influence of people, situations, or things, you probably arrive at a point of crisis. That is when decisions are not going to be the best because you're going to react from fear. Maybe if you take time to study and ask questions when you enter a new space, whether it's digital or physical, whether it's crossing a boundary and being asked for your biometrics or your fingerprints, please stop and realize, what does consent to really mean? And many things, including TAX3S, are voluntarily. And where is that going to take you? Not just in the next moment, but in the next year, in the next decade, because we're slowly allowing this compliance to become the norm. The best way is to know the enemy, to know what they're looking for, but not to live in a state of fear or paranoia or full of conspiracy theories, because that's not the right way to live. The right way to live is, if I don't know, I should learn, because again, ignorance is something that happens and depends on your will. Reclaiming the key. We're moving away from the judgmental polarities of the past and towards a vertical line of personal integrity that is grounded in the first principles. Freedom is the power to have more than just one option. You want to get away from slavery, any kind of slavery, financial, emotional, institutional, physical. Reclaiming your key is a physical application of the will that starts with human action. You bank yourself with cold wallets. Nostr is a social platform where you own your own keys and access. Nobody will ever push you out. Read contracts and see what you're applying to. Just because you want to be faster and get more stuff done, simply understanding that your body is the first property and consent is the boundary. In early May, Uranus will be squaring the lunar nodes at the very first degrees of the mutable signs. A tension that calls for a different orientation where what cannot be perfected must be surrendered, or it will move into another realm. Electrifying energy begins at the end of April and extends until mid-June. What feels restrictive now could appear as a shift in timelines, an equilibrium between the destiny of the body and the electricity of the wavelengths that carry the energy to upgrade. Uranus will be trine by Pluto in Aquarius and sextile by Neptune in Aries, while the South Node in Virgo creates a yod, a finger of God, from the end of April through the mid-June, as it squares Uranus, with Neptune and Pluto holding the sextile, concentrating pressure into a precise point of adjustment. And a final unexpected activation unfolds when Mars joins Uranus and also squares the nodes as Venus conjuncts the South Node, bringing themes of crisis as a last revision of values that initiates and pushes a new experience for the first week of July. I have upheld the deadline for May 9th that I have set a few months ago to have all the operating systems tested for the new launch, and I have used technology to shift the focus towards refinement and acceptance that we are in a new dawn. Plan accordingly. For May 6th, this configuration holds as a field of activation where Uranus engages the nodal axis as a reorientation, bringing a disruption of trajectory, while Pluto in Aquarius supports deep structural change and collective level. And Neptune in Aries opens a new current of vision moving into action. Saturn sits within the same field, giving form, boundary, and consequence to what is being initiated, asking that what emerges can be held in reality. This shift has been in how thoughts are no longer the main stage. They are seen as part of a wave that animates my solar plexus. As Uranus entered Gemini last year in my 4th house, and that is when I started working deeply in the unconscious part of myself that were wired during my upbringing and how I could begin to untangle them through somatic practice, whether through fascia movement, deep breathing and humming, vibrational plate work, hypopressives. There's a whole list of things that I've been doing. I took advantage of Uranus returning to Taurus in the fall, allowing my body to understand that this nervous system activation that will unfold in Gemini over the next 7 years is something I can meet in the body so I do not become overwhelmed by erratic thoughts. With the nodal axis now in Virgo, the south node is exactly on my Uranus in the 7th house, and I feel a release of ways of relating to others, to people, and to things, as this sits where the energy is less about perfection and more about discernment. And there is a sense that everything is aligning in a harmonious way. The North Node is now on my natal Saturn in the 1st house, and I am taking responsibility for how I receive these opportunities. In terms of technology, I've been educating myself in new systems, especially working with LLMs from a functional place as a way to create, to build systems to become sustainable, and to use these tools in support of my livelihood, aware of a possible tendency to detach from a physical reality. I have built the Monica OS, an operating system over the past months that includes a codex of my mind and all past works and how I operate, and it will be fully operational by May 9th. I chose that day because in human design, gates 40 and 37 have been activated by the nodal axis until then, supporting a continuous energy towards loyalty and community, and I see the agents I have prepared function as members within my local community. What an imagination. Transiting Jupiter in gate 53 pressures and fuels my gate 42 too. Mars in the sacral, and I feel the energy that opens and closes cycles, marking the end of a significant cycle while I still build a platform full of awareness. In the next few weeks, there is an opening to engage in a more direct, initiating energy, a movement that is not confined but begins to shape what is to come. Around the middle of the month, as Saturn, Mars, and Mercury converge in Aries, there is a surge that can feel urgent, expressive, and at times fiery, restrictive, and immediate, where energy wants to move and find direction, and where the mind may feel compelled to act or speak. That impulse can be observed, and if there has been a process of release and discernment, this becomes a moment to recognize what no longer holds, especially as Uranus begins its square to the nodes, marking the start of a deeper reorientation. No need to go to a battle unless your livelihood is at stake. Use the archetype of initiation to take a space you did not know you had. Own your new identity. Have a great week.